Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beer, what year was the 14th Amendment ratified?
In the 1860s.
1868. Doesn't that sound correct? And that was after which war?
The Civil War.
Which was done to end slavery, which preserve the Union and end slavery, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Did the American immigration system become better under the Biden administration?
It improved, yes.
The immigration system in America became better during the Biden years.
Correct.
Ms. Vaughn, is the Secretary of State required to halt visas for recalcitrant countries?
They're not required to. They have the authority to do that if they get a request from the Department of Homeland Security to do so because a country will not take their citizens back or doesn't cooperate in getting travel documents to return them after deportation.
Are there countries like that that are recalcitrant?
Yes, there are, quite a few.
Name a couple of the worst offenders.
Cuba, Venezuela, China, India and Bangladesh don't always cooperate. Iran.
Has the State Department over the last few years done their job to stop those recalcitrant countries from dumping criminals into our country and then not taking them back?
No, the State Department historically has been very reluctant to use visa sanctions to impose consequences on countries that are not fulfilling their international obligation to take their citizens back.
So should we be going to the administration and Secretary Rubio and insisting that they do that, or should we make a law change?
Well, I think it would help to make a law change to say that the Secretary must act in certain situations as defined by Congress to address recalcitrant countries and give even more tools besides visa sanctions, like potentially withholding foreign assistance or other diplomatic tools to require the Secretary to do so. I mean, it may be that Secretary Rubio would want to do that, but there are not always going to be administrations that want to push this issue. So if Congress changes the law, then they will have that obligation.
So you would suggest we should make it a requirement?
Yes.
Mr. Newman, in regards to categorical parole, the Mariana Islands, the CNMI, they have a program like that where there's no visa needed for people to be able to come in. Isn't that a version of birthright citizenship?
Yeah, as I understand it, it's become a major issue, birth tourism in CNMI, people just basically coming in to get U.S. citizenship.
So you have Chinese nationals coming in to this territory, and they're able to have a child there, and the child becomes a citizen.
Yeah, it's absurd. It shouldn't exist in a modern civilization.
Doesn't that seem like that could be a national security threat with all we know about communist China?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from the Wall Street Journal, December 22nd, 2017, in regards to this issue.
Without objection.
Mr. Fabricatori, hope I got your name right there. Can I just, some people just call you Fab, don't
Yes, sir.
We know all about the NGOs, including like the International Organization for Migration, IOM, which I saw when I was down at Panama 4 years ago and saw them processing people in. Don't they get significant amounts of money from the taxpayers of the United States?
They absolutely do, sir. They get a huge amount of money.
Do you have any ideas in the tens of millions?
It's tens of millions, yeah, higher than tens of millions.
And they've been a vital link, haven't they, in this whole process of illegal immigration into America. I mean, we talk about the cartels and the horrible things that they do, but don't those NGOs also serve as haven't they served as a vital link over the last 4 years of being able to bring people illegally into America?
Yes, sir. They have aided in helping illegal immigration enter into the United States.
Should we pull the money back from those organizations that have assisted in illegal immigration?
Yes, we should pull it back and use that money to help us with our deportation process.
If we're not able to pull that money back, should we have them help us reverse the flow and perhaps turn them into repatriation centers?
That sounds like it would be the right thing to do, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the era of America Last is over, as you said in your opening remarks. and it's time to enforce the laws here in the United States of America. I yield back.
You'll get no argument from me on that point, Mr. Tiffany.
Thanks so much, John. First of all, thank you, Representative Babin, for introducing this legislation. But also thank you, President Trump, for setting the table for us to be able to deal with issues like this that have long sat dormant, that have had the rule of law here in America, that are perhaps not following the original intent of the Constitution that we have here in the United States of America. I'm standing here today to share with you an example of birthright citizenship and its absurdity. In the Mariana Islands, there is a loophole that you can get into Saipan and have a baby there and have it declared a citizen. Back in 2009, visas were waived for the communist Chinese and for Russians to be able to come in to the CNMI and be able to recreate there and things like that. No visa required. Well, guess what happened? You saw many communist Chinese that came and had birth there. In fact, it got so bad a decade ago that there were far more births by Chinese women happening on Saipan than there was of the local residents. This was all set in place back in 2009. So as a result of that, they're saying that they have citizenship. So think about the country that is our greatest adversary, as we are here as they are in the 21st century here, communist China, and we are allowing them to be able to come in to our territory and simply be able to declare citizenship for children of the communist Chinese being born on that island. That is the absurdity of birthright tourism, and allowing. Just think about the great threat to our foreign policy that happens as a result of this. So it's time to close this up. This is just one small example of how our immigration system has been used in so many different ways to be weaponized against the American people. And a couple people have said about how this devalues citizenship in America. You know who knows the value of citizenship in America? The cartels. They charge $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. We've heard as much as $50,000 for a person to be able to come into America. We should not be giving these away like candy, like is happening in the Mariana Islands currently. It is time to address birthright citizenship as it was under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And I want to turn it over to my friend Mike Collins from the great state of Georgia. Gentlelady's time has expired. I'm going to take my 5 minutes for questioning now. By the way, I think that's the Fix Our Forests Act that you might have been referring to, Mr. Nyman. Mr. Clark, you talked about it was either a community or your family's mill closed. Tell us a little bit about that mill closing and why it closed.
So it was a community mill in Escalante, and it closed around the 90s when you were talking about there was a lot of things that happened. And my personal experience, I spent a summer working for the Forest Service on a trail crew, and I remember having a conversation with the forester who was kind of over timber permits at that time. And I remember I definitely treated her like I assumed that she was, I'm definitely on the right side of the spectrum. I treated her like she was not on my side of the spectrum. And she stopped me one day, she said, "Look, I'm a forester. Like, I want to have healthy forests. You've got to understand that that's what I'm going for." And so she and I had a conversation about the forest. And what would happen is a Utah-based environmental group would file a lawsuit every time they issued a timber permit. And it made it impossible for a sawmill in a pretty remote area to have what they needed to
So
get it done.
as a result of those lawsuits, that was a big part of why that mill had to close?
Yeah,
Yeah. Are there more mills in Utah today than there were 20 years ago?
definitely not.
Significantly less?
Significantly less.
You said something about you would want to change something in regards to judicial review. What is that specific item? I think you said it in your testimony. What is that item that you would like to see change?
So we were the victims of an out-of-court settlement where had the Biden administration just defended or stepped away and let us defend an action, we would have been fine. But the environmental groups filed a lawsuit challenging something that the Trump administration had approved, and then there was an out-of-court settlement that wasn't based on anything important. And so what we need is more certainty. The sue and settle thing harms us.
So it was a sue and settle.
Yes.
And it's been used time after time, hasn't it, to stop projects, to stop proper management in the western states in particular. Is that right?
And in particular, projects that have gone through the whole process and have been green-lighted finally, and then they get this sue and settle that isn't based in the facts. It's just based on the politics.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Canterbury. Earlier, you had a number of questions from Representative Neguse, and he tried to get this committee to believe that the first thing you believe in is that there needs to be an increase in funding. They call it resources here in Washington, D.C. There needs to be more resources. That's called greenbacks by most people. Is it necessary to increase the budget by the Bureau of Land Management to get more money to you, or could there be money that could simply be redirected and get it to the ground in order to be able to get the permits that you need?
So if I may, and I'll try not to take too much time, if we just back up in history, when I used to walk into the agency office, there would be 3 people in the office that managed the entirety of the resources and the lands that are being managed today with 300 to 400 people. Those 3 people could talk to us and sit down and figure out what was the best. We cannot regulate conservation. Conservation comes from those of us that's on the land.
Yeah. So, in other words, if the dollars are spent appropriately, you can get the permitting process can be completed for grazers like yourself. Is that correct?
It can be completed. You can help simplify that permitting process.
Mr. Nyman, if we change regulations, and would you rather have us change regulations and permitting, those type of things, or would you like the federal government to give you more money?
The first, for sure. Less regulation. I don't want more money. Businesses should stand on their own if it's given a fair chance. So regulation is helping destroy us.
How many families lost jobs as a result of the mill closures, that the reduction in some of your mills and the mill closures? How many families have lost jobs?
Directly related to us, along with the independent contractors, someplace between 150 and 200 families lost their jobs. If I go back to what happened in the 90s, I think it was like 26 or 30,000 jobs were lost. It was a huge amount.
26 or 30 to 30,000 jobs where?
That was throughout the West.
Throughout the West. And are Americans more likely to buy a 2x4, or you name whatever wood product, are they more likely to buy that from an American company these days than they were 40 years ago?
I am seeing a strong trend to lean back to support buying American. Buy from the U.S. I'm feeling that.
Compared to 40 years ago, when you look at today, with the mill closures that we've had across the United States, are you more likely to buy a 2x4 that's been made in the United States today than you were 40 years ago when we had a lot more mills?
Yes.
We're more likely to have it 40 years ago that it might have been made in America. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And it would really be nice to get back to that time, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a whole bunch more questions, but, you know, I listened to this from the ranking member when you talked about Humboldt County out in California, and that, boy, things are just going to fall apart as a result of that. Are you completely dependent on the federal government? Is that what's being said here? When you hear a statement like that, I don't think anyone should want to be put in that position. And this conjecture that we may not be able to complete projects, let's see if those projects actually do not happen, because I can tell you the Trump administration is going to make sure that money gets to those frontline communities rather than funding that 400 people that it now takes to get a grazing permit out. Let's do it in an effective, efficient manner that reflects the wants and needs of the American people. So with that, I conclude my questioning, and I want to thank all the witnesses for their valuable testimony. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for you, and we will ask that the witnesses respond to those questions in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the subcommittee must submit questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. on Friday, February 14th, 2025. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for the.
And now it's my pleasure to yield to my friend from Wisconsin, also in the Border Security Caucus, the gentleman, Tom Tiffany, for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to say thank you to the gentlemen that have led the Border Caucus, Mr. Babin and Mr. Biggs. Thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. It's as a result of your efforts that you continue to deliver this message to the American people of what a disaster this was going on in our southern border that caused this to be the #1 issue in the past election before the American people. And in particular, I want to thank Mr. Biggs from Arizona. The first trip I did after being sworn in May of 2020 was to go down to the southern border, and with a trip that he led with many of us, as he did so many times with so many members. I don't know if there's hardly any members on the Republican side that he didn't lead on the southern border to deliver the message. It's there that I got to meet people like Sheriff Mark Lamb from Pinal County in Arizona, Sheriff Mark Daniels down in Cochise County, who talked about back in 2020 about how the border was becoming secure. At the end of the Trump administration's first term, the border was becoming more secure. You visited them a year later, and they told you it was all deteriorating, simply because there was a change in the presidency. So I want to thank them for their leadership in regards to this. You have done a service to the American people, and hopefully we can fix this for the future. We just had a hearing this morning with a sheriff from one of the counties in Texas, a border county there, as well as one of the leaders of the Border Patrol Union. And they told us it is night and day since January 20th. Thank God we have new leadership in the White House, because the border is once again secure. So I would just say, remember when the media and Democrats told us that President Biden needed a bill to fix the border? That was a lie. As President Trump said last week in his joint address, all we really needed was a new president. If there's one thing that's been proven over the last month, it's that the Democrats' border invasion was intentional. President Trump announced illegal border crossings in February were the lowest in decades. February 2024 under Biden, nearly 190,000. 2025 under Trump, a little over 8,000. That's a 96% decrease without a single new law from Congress. The difference, real leadership. It's truly a shame that Democrats willingly let the killers of Laken Riley, Jocelyn Nungare, and Rachel Morin into this country. It's also a shame they did not deport criminals like the one in my congressional district who killed Stephen Nashholm, a father of 3 daughters. Thankfully, President Trump didn't wait for excuses. He took action by putting Remain in Mexico back in place, declared an emergency at our southern border, sent troops to help the Border Patrol, put a stop to illegal crossings, and signed the Laken Riley Act into law to deport dangerous criminals. Gone are the days of catch and release, which have a completely different meaning where I come from in the lakes in northern Wisconsin. But President Biden had turned it into an illegal alien term where illegals who were caught at our southern border were released into the U.S. To be clear, the last administration chose to let America be invaded. President Trump chose to stop it. Now American strength is back and stronger than ever, but we cannot stop here. Congress must act now to ensure these gains are not undone by the next weak president in the White House. We must codify things like stopping birthright citizenship, ending catch and release, ensuring that ICE has the tools needed to carry out mass deportations, and preventing parole abuse permanently. President Trump is doing his job. Now it's time for Congress to do ours. No more excuses. It's time to stand up for America. I yield back.
The gentleman, appreciate his willingness. We have been to the border together. As everyone speaking tonight, I think we have been, except for Mr. Gill, who I've got to get down there with me because it's always fun. Anyway, let's.
We will take members' questions. I'm going to start out with my 5 minutes of questioning here. And first of all, though, I want to recount the visit a year ago that I made down to the Tucson region and south of Tucson, where we had the hearing in Sierra Vista. And as you can see, the picture to my right here, we found all kinds of trash, human waste. It's the reason, the genesis of the Trash Act that you see in this legislation that we're considering today. I find it amazing that we have allowed millions of pounds of trash to be spread across these areas like the Coronado National Forest. I believe, Sheriff Cleveland, you commented about you perhaps worked in that sector. I find it amazing that this was simply allowed to happen under the Biden administration. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk consistently about protecting the environment. And if there's as much as a cap full of oil that's spilled on a drilling site, there's an immediate reaction, yet we see this degradation that's going on some of our public lands, and not a peep was said because it stood in the way of the narrative of the Holy Grail, which was to import as many people illegally into this country as possible, even at the cost to our environment. I find it amazing. But I would point out one other thing on that trip. We happened to stop at a hotel that had been turned into a halfway house in Tucson by one of the NGOs that were profiting off from illegal immigration. One of the NGOs that was one of the vital links in the chain, as well as the cartels, the International Organization for Migration, other entities that made illegal immigration a big business on both sides of the border. We found in that Tucson hotel exactly what was happening in Arizona. And we exposed it to the world, and it was amazing how the footage that we shot at that hotel in Tucson went viral, showing how many people were profiting off from illegal immigration, including some who claimed to be doing it for charitable purposes. Hopefully, that day is gone now forever. To that point, are things changing? Sheriff Cleveland, we've seen a new administration since January 20th. Tell us, are things changing on the southern border?
100%. It's a night and day. It's been a complete 180. I've anticipated activity in our county to start picking up. I'm not sure that I mentioned, but again, the activity we have in our area pales in comparison to many parts of the U.S.-Mexico border. But between Del Rio, Texas to El Paso, Texas, we are the busiest county and the busiest Border Patrol station. And I anticipated with the plus up of Department of Defense personnel on our side, as well as the Mexican National Guard on the south side, it would push activity to our area because we're a more rural area. But we have seen very few groups. We've seen the numbers, less than 300 apprehensions made across the southwest border, what it shows. I know I've said before in interviews, you know, a lot of times we say what a difference a year can make, but I'll tell you what a difference one person has made with President Trump's voice that has completely changed the dynamics on the southwest border.
So, yes or no, things have completely changed on the southern border since 2024?
Yes, completely changed.
Mr. Perez, has Border Patrol seen a change since January 20th?
100%, sir. Our posture has completely changed from a processing and facilitating workforce to a detecting and deterring workforce where we're out there doing the job that we wanted to do by protecting the border, having all of our agents out on the lane, forward deployed. Yes, sir.
Border Patrol currently has to respect legal restrictions associated like with wilderness areas, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do illegal immigrants also respect those rules and regulations that are supposed to be down on the southern border?
Not at all. They actually take advantage of it.
My final question I'm going to save for Lieutenant Lopez. So has legalization of marijuana made it less likely for the cartels to be growing marijuana in your state of California?
It's not less likely, it's more likely.
And are there, do you find a significant number of chemicals with marijuana grows? I think about it, it was happening in my state, in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, a number of years ago, and they found these very dangerous chemicals that were out in the environment. Do you find the same thing in California?
Yes, sir, we do.
With that, my 5 minutes are up, and I want to thank all of you for joining. I'll now recognize myself for an opening statement. Morning, sir. First of all, I want to begin by commending Representative Siscomani for both the timeliness and the importance of the legislation he has brought before us today. As has been widely reported, the Biden-Harris administration has compiled the most incompetent and disgraceful record imaginable when it comes to the protection of our southern border. Although President Biden is no longer in office, the country is still reeling from his damaging and disgraceful open border policies. Under the former president's watch, immigration authorities recorded more than 8.7 million encounters with illegal immigrants crossing into the United States from Mexico. This unprecedented surge overwhelmed America's response capabilities and created a confluence of security, environmental, and humanitarian crises. Thankfully, President Trump is taking strong and decisive action to end this crisis. But Congress must also do its part. We must create robust safeguards to ensure that this kind of reckless damage can never again be inflicted by an irresponsible president. Recognizing this duty, my colleague from Arizona, Representative Siscomani, has presented the thoughtful legislative package before us today. His bill empowers Border Patrol and local law enforcement to protect those areas that were left especially exposed and vulnerable by the Biden administration, our southern federal border lands. Approximately 35% of the southern border is federally owned, so the conditions that prevail in those areas have a significant influence on overall border security. And the large-scale illegal migration that has occurred in those regions has also destroyed fragile ecosystems. The facts are unambiguous. State governments, and we must rely on state estimates since federal agencies refuse to gather meaningful data, have calculated that each illegal migrant leaves behind an estimated 6 to 8 pounds of trash during their journey across the border. With more than 2.1 million encounters with illegal entrants last year, it's likely that illegal immigrants left a minimum of 12 million pounds of trash in 2024 alone. Worse still, this environmental degradation is happening in our most sensitive landscapes, national parks, national monuments, and wilderness areas. Last February, I witnessed some of this ecological devastation firsthand. When this subcommittee held a field oversight hearing on the border in Sierra Vista, Arizona, I visited the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge and the Coronado National Forest. While there, I was dismayed to see trash-strewn landscapes, illegal campfires, and decaying food piles. If we truly care about conserving our federal lands and leaving them in better state for future generations, we cannot ignore this crisis. And by the way, you can see a picture of that right behind me here. It is with this realization that prompted me to sponsor the Trashed Border Act last Congress. That bill requires federal land managers to develop policies and protocols for addressing the massive trash accumulations that have piled up along the southern border. It also requires those agencies to provide current data on the amount of waste collected on federal lands along the southern border. Finally, that legislation would increase penalties and fines for illegal immigrants who desecrate our public lands. Key provisions of that bill are incorporated in today's legislative package. The border crisis' impact on public lands was not limited solely to environmental damage. Under the Biden administration, federal borderlands became increasingly dangerous. Even in strong enforcement years, federal borderlands are often targeted by criminals, drug smugglers, and human traffickers because they are remote, largely uninhabited, and less frequently patrolled. Under President Biden's shameful neglect, certain sectors resembled all-out war zones. federal borderlands have also become a haven for organized crime. Drug smugglers and human traffickers have directed illegal border crossers towards sparsely populated portions of the border to enter the U.S. with a lower chance of detection. Border Patrol agents have reported being fired upon in rugged terrain when attempting to arrest suspected illegal migrants. Given the unprecedented numbers of known gang members and suspected terrorists who have crossed the border, this mismanagement has made America's public lands alarmingly unsafe. The issue is even more pronounced in wilderness areas, which comprise over 1 million acres along the southern border. In these areas, federal land managers impose severe limitations on Border Patrol's accessibility. For example, since mechanized and motorized vehicles are prohibited within wilderness areas, Border Patrol agents must rely on horses to pursue fleeing suspects in cars or off-highway vehicles. These nonsensical restrictions hamper operational effectiveness and needlessly jeopardize officer safety. Despite their dismal track record, I still hope that my Democrat colleagues will join us in protecting our federal borderlands and the safety of all who find themselves there. Everything in today's featured legislation deserves strong bipartisan support. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to the insights that each of you will bring to this important discussion.
Mr. Ezell for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for all being here today. For far too long, the Endangered Species Act, or ESA, has been overrun by federal agencies who implement radical environmental policies, making the ESA stray away from its basic intent to the recovery of species. The current ESA puts a burden on economic development, restricts public land use, and locks habitat restoration. Reform is much needed, and the weaponization caused by bureaucrats in Washington is unacceptable. We must ensure common sense conservation. I'm a proud original co-sponsor of H.R. 1887 and thank Chairman Westerman for his bold leadership and vision on this crucial legislation. Mr. Melito, you mentioned the importance of certainty in legislation and regulation to attract more investment and bolster America's competitive advantage. A critical ongoing aspect of this in the Gulf of America is the biological opinion for oil and gas operations, which NOAA has a deadline of May 21st to complete. Given the numerous ways that both the Gulf region and the U.S. benefits from energy production, how important is it that NOAA complete this biological opinion?
Oh, it's vitally important because we have almost 2 million barrels of production every day, and that's huge. Take that off the market, you'll have a dramatic increase in the price of energy for all Americans. It takes important funding away. It impacts jobs, and we need that biological opinion in place. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to continue to operate. So, we're going to continue to seek the help of Congress and the administration to make sure we don't have that gap. And if I get a chance, I'd like to comment one more time on Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. I think there's some additional facts I'd like to put out there. Thank you.
The testimony details great statistics about the jobs that are supported by the Gulf of America oil and gas productions industry. To list a few, the average industry wage is 29% higher than the national average. An average deep water project produces roughly $3 billion in total direct wages, and during the most active years of a given project, employment can be expected to peak at around 14,400 jobs. Can you expand on the way energy production in the Gulf of America supports individuals and families across the region?
Absolutely, and it's not just the Gulf Coast. We have people throughout the country who are in jobs in companies. Every state in the union, we have companies that support oil and gas production in the Gulf of America. And some will come out from the interior of the country, and they'll fly out, and they'll go out for 3 weeks, come back, go to their families for 3 weeks. But our supply chain is long and strong, and we are supporting mariners, boat captains, engineers, electricians, welders, cooks, chefs, you name it. We need them in the offshore environment. We need those jobs, and we need to make sure that we're creating a pipeline of energy and energy permitting and leasing so that we can continue to provide this energy for the American people and provide these good paying jobs for all Americans.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Would you yield to the chair for a moment?
Absolutely.
For the remainder of your time?
Absolutely.
Mr. Melito, you indicated that you had additional information you would like to share with regard to the Gulf of America.
Yes, Chair Hageman. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's a gentleman by the name of Scott Angel. He was the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources for the state of Louisiana, and he was also the longest-serving director of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management at the Department of the Interior during the prior Trump administration. He very seriously proposed the change of Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, and he proposed it because it sits between Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, and it is home to American companies and American employees producing American energy, and also American fishermen, both commercial and recreational, and our military. He did that in a serious way years ago, so there has been serious efforts in the past to do that, in addition to the comedians doing it as well. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that history lesson. That's important that we remember those things. The chair now.
Does the gentleman yield the balance of his time?
Yes, they said yes.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. It is really interesting to hear this high-mindedness in regards to how can we possibly rename something when we had military bases being renamed over the last 4 years, when we have statues being torn down or being proposed to be torn down by the previous administration, to all of a sudden be indignant about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, I find ironic. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. And the chair now recognizes Mr. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chernesky, in your testimony, I'm going to read from it. It says, RISA did little in the form of reforms while simultaneously dangerously expanding the scope of surveillance by changing the definition of what was considered an electronic communications service provider. Could you expand on that a little bit? What are you talking about there that RISA actually did not solve the problem and may have made it worse?
Thank you for the question, Representative. When we were looking at RISA last year, as a part of the reforms, they included a provision in there that would expand the definition of an electronic communication service provider. Now, this used to be a more narrowly tailored thing to capture data, from these particularized companies, but the way that they expanded the definition would capture a wider array of companies to virtually including everybody, right? And so what you ended up seeing was from the Department of Defense, or Justice rather, they made a promise that they were gonna keep their searches for this kind of data a lot more limited, but again, it is still problematic enough that even the chair of the Senate Intel Committee, Senator Warner, committed to trying to get a fix to that. Unfortunately, that still has not gotten done to date. But this is a real serious threat if now virtually anybody that has data on Americans could be subjected to being considered an electronic communication service provider.
So we think the new leadership at the FBI is going to be better in terms of respecting people's constitutional rights. Should Congress just move on from this issue, or should it act?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I think that in light of the fact that administrations can change, I would not want to leave it up for interpretation for a potential abuse underneath a future administration. So I do think that Congress should act to go and fix this overly broad definition of an electronic communication service provider.
Mr. Chair, could you comment on the amendment that Mr. Biggs had in his bill allowed for limited exceptions, yet we were being browbeaten saying that, no, you cannot do this, you cannot pass the Biggs bill because there'll be no way out to be able to get a perhaps bad actor. Would you care to comment on that?
Sure, well, and a number of reasons were offered for that, and my analysis is that it was all just fear-mongering. I mean, every single objection that I heard was just based on a misunderstanding of Mr. Biggs' amendment. For example, as Chairman Jordan mentioned earlier, the amendment had an exigent circumstances exception, so that if there were a ticking time bomb, the agency could act without getting a warrant. And of course, the amendment allowed for people to consent to searches. So if the FBI thought that somebody was being the subject of a cyber attack, for example, they could go to that person and say, we think you may be the subject of a cyber attack. Could we search your communications so that we can find out who it is and try to forestall it? And that person could then consent. And that's also a well-recognized exception under the Fourth Amendment. So the committee very carefully, and Chairman Biggs very carefully built in the protections that the FBI might legitimately need to be able to conduct searches without a warrant.
So the long and short of it, the Biggs Amendment dealt with what you term the exigent circumstances.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It had an express exception for that, and it also exempted metadata searches. So the FBI could actually look to see who was communicating with whom under Chairman Biggs' amendment. It just couldn't actually search the communications themselves.
I want to ask you another question, and I'm not sure if you're going to, you let me know if you can answer it or not. In 2021, the FBI lawyer, Kevin Kleinsmith,
Yes.
was sentenced to 12 months probation versus a typical 5 years. Why was that?
Well, it was an unfortunate slap on the wrist, and I'm separately representing Carter Page in his litigation against the department, and I thought it was an outrage that Kleinsmith got such a low sentence for such an egregious act of dishonesty before the FISA court.
Who was the judge in that FISA court case?
I believe it was Judge Bosberg.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, this is the same Judge Bosberg that we see regularly in the news these days. The ultimate insider judge here in Washington, D.C., gives a slap on the wrist to Kevin Kleinsmith, who misrepresented the information out there to the detriment of, it sounds like, your client, and now is doing everything he can to keep foreign alien criminals in the United States rather than sending them back home. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the entire committee, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of people were willing to give 702 a chance because of the various...
Question, and he added quite a bit more. Mr.
Strong
Tiffany.
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major Franklin, there's an organization or a publication, safehome.org. They listed Baltimore as the deadliest large city. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that report.
Yeah, they just last year, was in 2024, it just surpassed Memphis and Detroit. Mr. Holman, when a detainer has been issued, isn't that as a result of someone committing a crime?
ICE is reaching out to them to get them in custody, and they're on the radar likely because a crime was committed. That's why they're in that local jail.
So federal money flows to jurisdictions around the United States at taxpayers' expense to try to fight crime. Should taxpayers continue to fund sanctuary jurisdictions?
No, not at all. If you are in defiance of federal law and you're not working with federal law enforcement, you shouldn't receive a darn dime. Again, there's a lot of cooperative jurisdictions out there under President Trump. The 287G agreements that we're seeing, kind of the opposite of a sanctuary jurisdiction, has skyrocketed since President Trump took office. Those jurisdictions should be rewarded and helped for acting in accordance with federal law.
Should federal facilities be moved out of jurisdictions that are sanctuary cities?
If you're talking detention facilities or something like that, a lot of them...
Let me give you an example, and I'm going to ask Mr. Chairman to introduce this letter I sent to Doge, would ask unanimous consent to enter that letter. But anyhow, I sent a letter. The SBA is moving facilities out of Boston, which is a sanctuary city, and I sent a letter to Doge saying, would you look into Dane County, Wisconsin, which is Madison, would you look into moving facilities out of there if they're going to continue to be a sanctuary county? Do you think that's appropriate?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sheriff, so I mentioned Dane County, Wisconsin, and there was a situation where a gang member from Venezuela, Tren de Aragua gang member, he was charged with false imprisonment and battery in Dane County last year, went on to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, which is about 100 miles from Madison to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, over on the Mississippi River. And this gang member was charged with domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and strangulation by the Prairie du Chien Police Department. Does it surprise you that another community is affected when there is a sanctuary community that is not honoring ICE detainers?
No.
Does it make it more dangerous for people throughout the region, not just, let's use this example of Dane County, Wisconsin, does it make it more dangerous for people throughout a region as a result of having these sanctuary policies?
I think like the gentleman over here said earlier, I think every situation is different, every location is different, every circumstance is different. But I do think the policies matter, and the policies that we're faced with in sanctuary policy is it's too hampering for the situation that we're dealing with on the ground.
Ms. Carter Walters, so you know that Wisconsin is just north of you in Chicago, and I just cited Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin is 100 miles from Madison, Wisconsin, and Kenosha, Wisconsin is only 64 miles north of Chicago. Should people in Wisconsin be concerned about the sanctuary policies that are in Chicago?
Exactly, because they don't just stay in Chicago. They're in Indiana. They're all in the suburbs. So yes, they definitely should be afraid.
Why in the world do civic leaders like Mayor Johnson want to advance policies like this that not only make their own city less safe, but the entire region less safe?
Because we believe that that's how they're funneling money and stealing our tax dollars. So that's why we are demanding a forensic audit on how a breakdown of how those funds were allocated, because we have yet received anything of a breakdown to show how our tax dollars were spent. So yes, we believe that's how they're funneling the money, and that's why we're asking for a forensic audit, and we want arrests being made.
Mr. Chairman, I think these witnesses make the case so well that it is not just the sanctuary community that is being affected by these policies that they are implementing. It's an entire region. Most of the people of Wisconsin are affected as a result of what's going on in Dane County, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois. It is time for this to stop, and there needs to be consequences for what is going on with these sanctuary communities. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major Franklin, you're famous in Maryland.
With questions, and I'm going to recognize the gentleman from the great state of Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wild, what has the response been both federally and states that you've worked in with faith-based organizations like yourself? Tell us the response that you get.
So one of the things that I know about corrections is that people tend to be very pragmatic. Does this work? And what we've seen is a large expansion of our programs. Our Warden Exchange program, like I said, we just had our largest cohort ever. 149 correctional leaders are going through it right now. Our Prison Fellowship Academies, our GROWs, our Angel Tree program have continued to expand. As I mentioned, we're in all 50 states, and so I'd say the response has been very good.
Where you find governments that are not as welcoming, what do you hear from them?
So we operate in states as diverse as Washington and Oregon to Texas, Florida, North Dakota, Nebraska, California, all of them. And as I said, they tend to be very pragmatic and ask the question, is it voluntary? The answer is yes. Does it work? It does. And so we're allowed to operate, and over time, we're able to really affect the prison culture, which we hear both from the staff as well as leadership.
Are there any changes needed by Congress to help you further your mission?
Thus far, we have not been able to operate our in-prison programs, our academies or our GROWs within the Bureau of Prisons. And we think that both of those programs, as well as our Warden Exchange program that helps assist correctional leaders at no cost to the state, can be a tremendous asset and a force multiplier to help solve some of these problems facing the Bureau.
Mr. Pertil, we heard earlier from the ranking member, do you, in regards to President Trump is failing, do you agree President Trump does not care about prisons? That's what we heard, is that he does not care about prisons by one of the members up here. Do you agree with that?
I do not. Respectfully, sir, do not agree with that. We worked extremely closely with the first Trump administration on crafting the First Step Act, and I can tell you that they were very involved, very concerned. It would not have happened without Mr. Trump's personal leadership, so it simply doesn't comport with what I've experienced.
Do you think President Trump should continue with the status quo? Because that's what I'm hearing, is that he doesn't care about prisons. We should leave things as is. Do you think we should leave the status quo?
No, sir. I think there's much here, as this committee well knows, that there's much here that under the Bureau of Prisons that needs to be addressed. And I think it can be addressed in terms of what Mr. Trump tried to do in his first administration. And then I have every reason to believe he's going to try to continue in his second.
Give me something that's primary in your mind that could be a good change for federal prisons.
Well, I think to go back to to my testimony, I do think that focusing federal prisons are in a unique position in terms of corrections facilities across the country. I think they are best equipped to deal with some of the prisoners that are really most dangerous, most likely to commit new crimes, to recidivate. And that's really, a friend of mine at the Heritage Foundation, John Malcolm, likes to say, prison beds are some of the most expensive hotel rooms in the country. I want to reserve them for the people who are most dangerous to society. So I think doing all that we can to make sure that that is the population within the federal prisons, because they're just better equipped to deal with it, I think, than any other system in the country.
In my home state of Wisconsin, back when I was in the state legislature, we had a youth correctional facility that the ACLU came in and sued to prevent them, the staff, they restricted the staff from using certain measures that they had used for a long, long time. And the day that the judge accepted the ACLU's brief and said, we're going to accept the policies that you're suggesting for us, the young people in the correctional facility went on the roof of this facility and taunted the guards, saying, you can't touch us. Is it surprising to you that a couple years later that a staff youth counselor was killed in that facility?
Oh, in all honesty, sir, I couldn't address that. I don't know anything about the facts of the situation.
Have you seen instances where an organization like the ACLU has sued and prevented staff from being able to do their jobs with using the proper restraints? Have you seen that nationally?
I think that there's a lot of questions in that issue. I think that it's BOP's job to ensure both the safety and the safety of the staff as well as the inmates. And I think limiting them in order to be able to do that is always dangerous, undermining the respect that law enforcement should be given. I think leads to kind of the sense of, the idea that people are taunting guards and things like that. I think that also undermines security. But I also think that we have to remember that when people are within our custody, we have to do everything to make sure that we're remembering to treat them as people and remembering that they still have rights while they're in there. So I think it's a very difficult challenge that BOP has
Your time is
to make sure that
expired.
they're balancing both of those sides.
Yeah, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the
Immigration system improved under the Biden administration?
Under some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So it's a very large, complex system, as you know. It's second in complexity only to the income tax.
So your colleague David Beer was here about 6 months ago, and he said, yes, the immigration system improved under the Biden administration. What's the change here of Cato's position?
So the Cato Institute doesn't have positions. The scholars of the Cato Institute do. But if you want to narrow in on the legal immigration system, then I agree with my colleague David that the legal immigration system did improve during the Biden administration. But there's large other sections of immigration that have to do with enforcement, other categories
you're
of
going around
things.
telling people around the country here today that, hey, I'm going to split hairs, and I'm going to tell people that this one subset of immigration, hey, things are just fine in the United States of America. It's all good. When they understand this as a broader part of the immigration system as a whole, which has been a complete failure.
Well, sir,
So
I
you're
don't work in talking points like that. I'm interested in facts, and the legal immigration system is not just fine. I've spent my career writing about how we need to expand legal immigration. So no, I don't go around saying it's just fine. I said that things have improved, and no, I don't go around
Sir,
talking
don't
in
filibuster.
talking
I
points.
got questions to ask, and I only have 5 minutes. So you're saying you say in here vetting is effective and the visa process is secure. You stand by that, right?
Absolutely.
How did 350,000 children come into America that we have no idea where they're at the end of the Biden administration? How are there 600,000 criminal aliens in this country that committed oftentimes violent crimes, everything from attempted murder to carjacking.
The vast majority of those did not go through the legal immigration system. That is entirely the point that we are trying to make here today, is that they did not go through the legal immigration. If they did, then most of those people would have been weeded out.
This administration, which you said,
This administration
did a
or
good
the
job in
last
some
one?
ways. The previous administration, they just let people come in without being able to get a visa. So, does your data that you purport to put out there that proves this, does it include the death of Stephen Nashwam, a truck driver in Rusk County, Wisconsin, up where I live, who left behind 3 daughters? Does that include him in the data? He's dead as a result of an illegal alien running him off the road?
The evidence that we have is
Does it include the 2 children in Abbotsford, Wisconsin?
It includes all
also in
people who
my
are convicted
district,
of crimes
who
in
are
this country,
dead
sir, and
as
all
a
people who
result
are
of an
arrested and
illegal-
all people who are incarcerated for crimes in the United States during multiple years, including the great state of Texas, which has wonderful data, the best crime data out there, confirms my research. Every death and every murder is a tragedy, and those individual criminals should be punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Is Mr.
But that is not a
Nashwam or
reason
these
to punish
are
other
they
people
in
who
the
are
data?
not criminals for
Are
that.
they in the data?
Of course.
Are the 100,000 children that died of or young people, #1 killer of young people in America, ages what, 21 to 45, fentanyl? Do you include the fentanyl
You mean the
deaths?
people who voluntarily took fentanyl and overdosed under that tragic situations? No, those are not homicides, sir.
Or do you mean the communist Chinese who sent the precursors over here and then the cartels
talking about the drug war
brewed it
now? We're
and
talking
sent
about
it
the
in?
drug war?
And by the way, they sent it in being carried by people who are coming in with the immigration
Why don't you
system.
count the
are
automobiles
defending,
imported that also
which
cause
you are
car
defending.
accidents?
Have you done, in your data, have you reviewed the impact on wages for those who are in the lowest economic strata with these millions of people coming into America taking their jobs? I'll end there. Ms. Vaughn.
Of course,
Ms.
I have.
Vaughn.
Vast economic literature on
Ms.
that
Vaughn,
contradicts your statement.
share with us, has there been an impact on Americans' earnings as a result of illegal immigration?
There's no question that illegal immigration causes unfair competition, costing people job opportunities, depressing their wages, and causing those millions of Americans who've dropped out of the labor market to have trouble getting back into it. No question.
So it's clear they're making less money.
Yes.
And that should be included in any data set when we're considering what we should do with immigration. Is that correct?
That's the inevitable result. That's supply and demand. When you increase the supply of labor, distort the labor markets, you're going to get lower wages.
Supply and demand. You're only talking about supply. These immigrants are people who are also raised
No, I'll direct the questions to you, sir. Mr. Hankin,
I'm not asking a question.
Was there a cost to the fentanyl deaths here in America?
The open border made it a lot easier to bring in a lot of drugs, and a lot of drugs killed, as you said, about 66,000 people, just fentanyl alone in 1 year.
How much do you value a life?
You can't put a price on a human life.
I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Ladies, time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany, for 5 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one thing I'm really heartened about is the choice that my youngest daughter made to become an environmental engineer. It sounds like she has a bright future here based on the testimony that that we heard earlier. Mr. Herget, would you agree that delay is death?
Absolutely.
Did the originators of NEPA, did they envision NEPA becoming what it is today?
Absolutely not. When Rachel Carson put NEPA together, the idea that it would be used as an obstruction tool to fight a proxy war on fossil fuels that has now backfired would never have been something that she had envisioned.
Yeah, I point to one of the products of NEPA is the chart right behind me. All you got to do is look at the blue line is fire, the green slashes are harvest on our national forest. And I believe the watershed year was 1988 when we reversed, or when we stopped managing our forests on federal lands in the way that we should. And I would just say, Mr. Mergen, in regards to your comments, we're losing all this expertise. What I hear consistently back home is that all kinds of ologists are being hired over the last couple decades in federal forest management, and foresters are in a significant minority. So when you talk about not having the people, we do not have enough foresters anymore, and that has resulted in this: far more fire, far less fiber being produced here in America. And I'll put some numbers to it. We did something called the Forest Practices Study when I was in the state legislature and did a rigorous review of state forest management. But I extrapolated those numbers to the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, which covers about 1.5 million acres in northern Wisconsin. And over the last 3 decades, the estimates that I came up with, while crude, I think they're fairly accurate, $250 million worth of value that have been left behind on the national forest. But what's also left behind were families. There are a number of sawmills that closed as a result of that. I've heard from Representative McClintock what's happened in the Sierras, where they've lost dozens, if not hundreds of mills over the last couple decades. Well, something similar, while not on the same scale, has happened in northern Wisconsin as a result of this preservationist attitude that you can see with this chart. Mr. Bowles, I'd like to ask you a question. Can you give me an example of a project that timelines are extended significantly for the American road and transportation builders? Do you have any examples where it's taken far longer than what it should to be able to build a project?
I don't have any personal examples where projects were hampered by the NEPA process, but in the written testimony, there are some of our members and some of my colleagues that have experienced that. I think some in a project in Arkansas, a project in Boston, and then cited one in Oregon where that delays have just extended the construction process to really beyond what anybody could imagine.
Does it end up extending it into decades, not just years?
I guess it doesn't extend, and I mean, it continues to extend until it's over.
So some of them are not over.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Mr. Campbell, is it true the grid has become more unstable over the last decade, the electrical grid here in the United States?
Yes, it has. Load growth is significant now, and we've closed a lot of our always available base load power plants.
Yeah, I'm just going to close with this, Mr. Chairman. I want to know how long. We just had that iconic lodge up on the north rim of the Grand Canyon burned down in the last couple of weeks as a result of fire that got away that it appears should not have gotten away, and I hope we have an oversight hearing in regards to that. I want to know how long it's going to take to rebuild that lodge. And any guesses, if we have to go through this extensive EIS process, how long it's going to take. And I will just close with asking unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to introduce a product here from the Breakthrough Foundation, the procedural hangover, how NEPA litigation obstructs critical projects. And they talk specifically about the Chico project in California. But I thought there was a very operative line in here. By delaying the project for years, Conservation Congress, an environmental outfit out of Canada or Montana, likely did more damage to the natural habitat of the northern spotted owl than any amount of Forest Service intervention could have. I yield back. Gentleman yields. Chief Schultz, I'm the last one. I mentioned in the E&E article in my opening statement, it highlighted that the Biden administration, which there were enormous amounts of money allocated beyond base a few years ago, and yet you were left with a $750 million budget shortfall. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Also, I'd like to enter into the record a report from USDA's Inspector General that found the Forest Service exceeded a limit on administrative expenses for the community wildfire defense grants by $37 million. Without objection, so ordered. So think about it. This was put in place a few years ago, this community wildfire defense grants, and the Inspector General found that the money that was supposed to be going to the front line to fight fire was being diverted to Washington, D.C. Have you had any wildfires here in Washington? Do you know of any wildfires in Washington, D.C. in the last few years?
No, sir.
Yeah, being diverted away from where it should. So Chief Schultz, the question for me is, what state did you find the Forest Service budget when you came into office.
Mr. Chairman, the budget, as you've indicated previously, was in the hole about $750 million. So in addition to the hiring freeze that was in place, and we did not hire seasonals, the reductions that have taken place, this is the piece we haven't talked about, the 5,200 people that have left on a voluntary on a basis, that is necessary for us to meet and be fiscally responsible and manage within our budget. And if you look at the secretary, as a part of the restructuring effort, her first principle that she identified was that the workforce aligns with our federal resources. So when you think about what we're trying to achieve as a part of this restructuring effort is to make sure that we are managing our workforce within the budget that we have, as opposed to saying we have this many people. We need to look at the budget we have and administer that budget in a way that's fiscally responsible pursuant to federal law. So that's what's driving what we're doing.
And yet you've been largely able to manage wildfire this season. Isn't that correct? I listened to Mr. Bentz from Oregon. He commented about he has firefighters asking for work. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would say we have had adequate resources this season to fight the wildfires. Yes, sir.
What effect do frivolous lawsuits have on the work that the Forest Service does?
Mr. Chairman, it has a significant impact on our timber sale programs, and it can affect other programs as well. At Region 1, for instance, we have over 300 million board feet that is tied up in litigation, and there's another 200 million feet that is at threat of litigation. So it definitely impairs things. Not only does it slow things down in the courts, but it also makes managers more risk averse, and they end up doing more review and creating longer documents, taking longer time to get decisions made in anticipation of things going to court. So I would argue that litigation has a significant impact on the work that we do.
I have information that there's 3 environmental NGOs at present who are responsible for nearly half of the forest management lawsuits. Does that sound about right?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the information for anybody. I can't dispute it. I don't know those numbers.
3 environmental NGOs. Should Congress consider some reforms like the Equal Access to Justice Act to stop these frivolous lawsuits?
Now, Mr. Chairman, that's been discussed for years, and I think that's something that would definitely warrant greater discussion with Congress. I mean, it's been discussed for many years.
Finally, in regards to access, gentlelady from Wyoming talked about that, and is access to our national forests a priority for you?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it is. When you think about how people know the national forest system, it's primarily through recreation. And having access to those, whether they like to hike, whether they fish, whether they hunt, whether they use motorized vehicles or equestrians, it's a significant part of what we do. And it's looking at not just acquiring new access, but opening up access to the lands that we currently manage.
And that is why the roadless rule is being reviewed. Is that accurate?
That's a part of what we're looking at, yes, sir, is opening up access. That's correct.
I appreciate that very much. I would urge you at some point to look at back when I was in the state legislature, we did a study, a peer-reviewed study called the Forest Practices Study. It was managed by the Great Lakes Timber Professionals in Wisconsin. And I would urge you to take a look at that. While it focused on state land and the reduction in harvest and value to the taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin on some state-managed properties, I extrapolated that study to national forest lands, of which we have 1.5 million acres in Wisconsin, right? The Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest. By the way, have you learned how to spell Chequamegon-Nicolet yet?
It's got a Q in there.
Yeah, there's a Q in there. And but I extrapolated that study to the Forest Service, and I believe that over the course of 30 years, once we saw this management regime that became preservation rather than management after 1988, that it actually had cost the federal government, the state of Wisconsin, and the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest specifically, $250 million in value. And this forest practices study was really good because we had a company come in and do a rendition of an alternate harvest, and we showed it to people and said, can you tell the difference between the 2 harvests? They could not, yet there was millions of dollars of value that was brought out, even though it did not look like the management was much different in terms of how the public would view it. If you get a chance, I'm sure you can find a person that would share that information with you. I think you would find it quite interesting. Director, is President Trump implicated in any wrongdoing related to Jeffrey Epstein?
Based on the entirety of the evidence that we have, absolutely not.
The president is not implicated.
Correct.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about China's malign influence here in America. And, we've seen spy balloons traverse the United States. We've seen police stations in communities around America. And sitting in the chair you're in just 2 years ago, there was a sheriff from Cochise County, Arizona, Mark Daniels, that was here, who said that the exponential increase in the amount of fentanyl that is coming into America is directly related to the open borders policies of the previous administration. Do you agree with Sheriff Daniels' characterization?
In large part, yes.
So, since you've been director, has there been a reduction we've talked about how the border is largely secure now, right?
The southern border, yes, sir.
The southern border is largely secure. Has there been a concomitant reduction or a reduction in the amount of fentanyl that is coming into America?
There has been a massive reduction to the tune of, we have seized more than 25% year-to-date this year than the prior year, and that's enough fentanyl to kill 120 million Americans.
Does China play a role in this fentanyl that's coming to America?
As I stated in my opening, sir, what they do and the companies in China, mainland China do, is produce the precursors and the cutting agents that they ship overseas through various countries into the Mexican drug cartels who produce it. So they basically are the cooks in terms of the ingredients.
Tell us, what is the FBI doing to stop China from delivering death to America?
So for the first time in a decade, I actually reached out to my counterpart at the Ministry of Public Security. No one at the FBI had done so, to engage.
Ministry of Security, where's that?
In mainland China.
In mainland China, okay, thank you.
To engage in a conversation to say, hey, can we have a certain number of these precursor chemicals listed in China so that they become illegal and illegal to trade. We're also working with our counterparts in places like India and Guatemala because the transshipment routes of the precursors, the Mexican drug cartels have gotten creative, and instead of coming directly to America are going into these countries. And we've had massive success in India and Guatemala, and in those governments, great partnerships in shutting down the ability to ship the precursors into those countries, which are ultimately destined to America.
So those people that are working with security agencies have been working with you, is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
So I want to turn to a couple cases that are at the University of Michigan, where Chinese nationals, on behalf of the Chinese government, smuggled in illicit biological materials, stuff that can harm our agricultural industry. What actions are you taking as we see repeated stories of Chinese nationals doing this in the United States?
So just that, sir. In this calendar year alone, as I was mentioning, our counterintelligence operations and cases brought against the Chinese are up by, I think, something like 40%. And specifically, the cases in Michigan show two threat streams, not just against our agricultural industry, which is a threat to national security, but they were also bringing in chemical agents and mushrooms, I'm not the exact expert, that would have ultimately hurt our population. We arrested and charged all of those individuals, and we were aggressively going after them in every single state because they weren't doing it in Michigan alone.
Should research universities across the United States be doing a thorough job of vetting Chinese nationals that are coming to their universities?
They should.
Turning to spying in America, we heard the stories about Senator Dianne Feinstein's driver, who was a Chinese spy. We're familiar with Linda's son, who worked in Governor Hochul's office, Christine Fang in California. What are you doing to find these people who are Chinese spies that are trying to burrow themselves into the politics of America? Because we know it's happening, right?
Yes, it is. And what our counterintelligence unit is doing is aggressively seeking the intelligence into where these individuals are working. Then we are utilizing our operational authorities to go in and investigate them either through our human source networks and collecting information through lawful process, online search warrants and data so that we can bring proper arrest charges and publicize to the world what they're doing here. And just because we've caught a few doesn't mean we've caught everybody. We've got a lot more to go.
I get one more quick question in. The FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin, Hannah Dugan, for interfering with a federal law enforcement operation. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And is a judge above the law here in the United States of America?
Well, no one is, and that case is ongoing, but as you stated, and these allegations said, there was an interference in a federal lawfully executed federal law enforcement priority that was interfered with.
I yield